It was a bright, sunny morning. The streets were buzzing with the usual chaos, cars honking, people rushing to work, street vendors calling out their prices. Amid the noise and motion, a solitary figure shuffled slowly along the sidewalk. His clothes were worn and tattered, his shoes scuffed and barely holding together. His face was marked with exhaustion, and his eyes carried the weight of days without proper food or rest. He spotted a man walking calmly among the crowd, moving with a quiet confidence that made heads turn without effort. It was Steven Seagal. Sunglasses on, hands in his pockets, face composed and unreadable, he walked at a steady pace, paying no attention to the hustle around him. To anyone watching, he seemed untouchable, almost like a figure from a movie who had stepped into the real world. The homeless man took a deep breath and stepped forward. His voice trembled slightly as he called out, "Sir, can you spare just $1?" For a brief moment, time seemed to slow. People walking by glanced over, some smirking, some shaking their heads. They expected the usual reaction, a dismissive wave, a harsh word, or simple ignorance. After all, this was the city. Kindness was rare, and for the homeless, being ignored was the norm. Steven stopped and looked down at the man. His face remained calm, unreadable, but his eyes carried a quiet intensity. He didn't flinch or look away. He simply studied the man as if reading the story behind the worn jacket, the tired eyes, and the hesitant request. The homeless man shuffled nervously, wringing his hands, unsure if he had overstepped, unsure if this stranger would be like all the others. The crowd held its breath, sensing something unusual was about to happen. There was a tension in the air, not anger or fear, but curiosity. Everyone around instinctively knew that whatever Steven Seagal would do next would be worth watching. Then the man repeated, "Just $1, sir, please." His voice was quieter this time, almost desperate. The sunlight reflected off the glass windows of nearby buildings, casting a golden glow on the two figures standing on the sidewalk. And in that moment, the world seemed to pause, waiting for a response that no one could predict. What happened next shocked everyone. The response was unlike anything anyone around had seen, a mix of unexpected generosity, humility, and quiet power that left the entire street stunned. It was a bright morning in the heart of the city. Sunlight bounced off glass buildings and the pavement, turning the streets into a river of gold and reflections. People hurried past, clutching coffee cups, briefcases, and smartphones, their eyes glued to screens or focused on the next appointment. The hum of traffic filled the air, punctuated by the occasional siren or horn. The city was alive, but in its usual rush, it paid little attention to the quieter corners of life, corners where the less fortunate often went unnoticed. Among the throng, a solitary figure moved slowly. He was small in stature, wearing a faded jacket with patches where the fabric had worn thin. His pants were dirty and torn at the hem, his shoes worn down to the soles. Every step seemed deliberate yet hesitant, as though he feared the world might push him aside, again. His eyes darted nervously from one passerby to another, hoping, yet expecting disappointment. Hunger tugged at his stomach, and a chill clung to him despite the morning sun. Ahead, walking with calm authority, was Steven Seagal. He moved like someone entirely unaffected by the chaos around him. Hands in his pockets, sunglasses shielding his eyes, face composed in that familiar stoic way, he made his way through the crowd. People turned their heads as he passed. There was a subtle gravity to his presence, a sense that he commanded respect without ever raising his voice. No one shouted for his attention. No one pushed or hurried him along. He simply existed, a quiet force amidst the city's motion. The homeless man hesitated for a moment. He knew the risk of speaking out in a busy street. Most people would either ignore him or react with irritation. But something in Steven Seagal's calm, unhurried presence gave him a flicker of hope. Summoning courage, he stepped in front of the actor. His voice was low and shaky, barely above a whisper, yet it carried through the ambient noise of the street. "Can you give me $1, sir?" Immediately, the world reacted. People around glanced over, some smirking, others whispering to each other. "He's going to get ignored," one muttered. "Watch him get brushed off," said another, shaking their head. No one expected anything else. In the city, kindness was rare, especially for someone like him, a man clearly living on the margins. Steven stopped walking. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Cars passed, horns blared, Footsteps clicked on the pavement, yet in that tiny space around the two men, the noise seemed to fade. Steven looked at the man with calm intensity. There was no judgment, no irritation, no trace of impatience. His eyes scanned the man, taking in the worn jacket, the anxious expression, the desperate hands. It was a look that read deeper than words, a look that saw struggle and humanity in equal measure. The homeless man's hands trembled as he held them together, unsure of what to do next. He repeated himself, quieter this time, almost pleading. "Just $1, sir. Please." The passers-by watched, some recording on their phones, others frozen mid-step. They had seen celebrities, they had seen people beg, but rarely had the two intersected in a moment that felt so fragile, so intimate, yet charged with the weight of possibility. Steven tilted his head slightly, studying the man. There was no mockery in his gaze, no condescension. Just a calm, measured presence that seemed to say, "I see you." The street around them felt different now, slower, as if the sunlight itself had softened, as if everyone present had unconsciously leaned in to witness what would happen next. "And then, before we continue, here's a question for you, a simple one, but important. Comment below. What would you do if someone asked you for just $1 today? Would you turn away? Ignore them? Or do what feels impossible in a world that rarely stops? Show kindness?" The homeless man didn't know the answer yet. The crowd didn't either. But one thing was certain, the response he was about to receive would change the mood of the entire street, and for those watching, it would be unforgettable. Steven Seagal stood still on the sunlit sidewalk, the city's usual rush continuing around him, yet somehow fading into the background. He looked at the homeless man with calm intensity, his expression unreadable yet deeply attentive. There was no judgment in his eyes, no impatience, no trace of the irritation that most people would have shown. He simply observed the man, taking in the subtle cues of his desperation, the nervous twitch of his hands, the slight tremor in his voice, the hopeful yet wary look in his eyes. The homeless man's hope seemed fragile, almost brittle. Each second stretched endlessly, the tension between expectation and uncertainty pressing down on him like a physical weight. He glanced at the people around him, sensing their judgment. Some whispered to each other, smirking at what they assumed was the man's inevitable rejection. Others shook their heads in pity, muttering about the hopelessness of street life. A few laughed openly, the sound harsh and cruel against the quiet determination in the man's voice. "Just $1, he repeated, desperation creeping into his tone. "Please, sir, just $1. His voice was smaller now, almost pleading, as if saying it one more time might somehow make the impossible possible. His eyes flickered toward Steven, searching for any hint of mercy, any spark of humanity. Around them, the city hummed along, indifferent. People pushed past, some glancing with curiosity, others completely absorbed in their own worlds, yet the moment felt suspended in time. Steven Seagal's response was slow, deliberate. He reached into the pocket of his jacket. The movement was unhurried, almost meditative. The passers-by instinctively leaned in, expecting the usual outcome, a single coin, perhaps a crumpled bill tossed with a faint nod, a perfunctory gesture of pity that would end the encounter as quickly as possible. They did not know Steven Seagal. They could not imagine the weight of what he was about to do. The man's hands tightened slightly, clutching together as if bracing for the rejection he had grown accustomed to. His lips pressed together, and a quiet tremor ran through his shoulders. Some onlookers started whispering among themselves, speculating, "He'll just ignore him. Watch, nothing's going to happen." Others, more cynical, shook their heads and stepped back, sensing something unusual yet not daring to intervene. Then, instead of a coin, a small bill, or a dismissive gesture, Steven's hand emerged from his pocket holding something larger, something no one had expected. The action was calm, unassuming, almost casual in the way a storm can appear suddenly on a clear day. The homeless man's eyes widened in disbelief, and the crowd around them instinctively paused, sensing the shift in energy. There was a stillness in the street, a collective intake of breath, as everyone present realized that the ordinary rules of giving and taking were about to be rewritten. Steven did not speak immediately. He merely held out his hand, offering more than the man could have imagined. The weight of the gesture, the intent behind it, was heavier than any money could measure. It was not charity. It was respect, acknowledgement, and empowerment wrapped into a single, unexpected act. The homeless man's jaw trembled. He opened his mouth, words failing him, as tears began to pool in his eyes. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. People around began to murmur, some recording the scene on their phones, others just standing frozen, unsure whether to intervene or simply watch. The tension that had gripped the street moments ago was now replaced by awe. What Steven Seagal was about to do would change not only the man's day but the entire course of his life. In that quiet, sunlit street, generosity became a force so powerful that it demanded attention, respect, and reflection. And for those witnessing it, the lesson was clear. Sometimes, true strength is measured not in force, not in money, but in the courage to act with unexpected kindness. The homeless man froze, as if time itself had stopped. The world around him, the bustling street, the honking cars, the pedestrians hurrying past, seemed to blur, fading into the background. All that remained was the moment between him and Steven Seagal. His heart pounded in his chest, a mixture of shock, disbelief, and a fragile spark of hope. He had asked for $1, nothing more, and yet he was being offered something far beyond what he had dared to imagine. The crowd around them reacted instinctively. People gasped and instinctively stepped back, creating a small circle of space around the two men. Phones emerged from pockets and hands, recording the scene. Strangers whispered to one another, their voices a mix of awe and confusion. "Did that just happen?" one woman muttered. "Is he giving him a whole wallet?" someone else said, disbelief ringing in their voice. Steven's expression remained calm, almost serene. He smiled gently, a soft curve of his lips that carried neither arrogance nor condescension. Then he nodded slightly at the man in front of him, conveying reassurance and understanding. His voice was soft but deliberate, carrying weight beyond the words themselves. "Sometimes kindness is more than money." The homeless man blinked repeatedly, trying to process the words. Confusion crossed his face, the way someone's mind scrambles to comprehend something entirely unexpected. He had lived his life on the streets, accustomed to rejection and indifference, never imagining a moment when genuine compassion would meet him so openly. The warmth of the words, the calm authority behind them, struck him more profoundly than the wallet in Steven's hand. Steven crouched slightly to meet the man's eyes, closing the physical distance with deliberate patience. The gesture was small, yet monumental. It was a silent acknowledgement that the man's presence mattered, that he was seen, respected, and valued. The gesture communicated what money alone could never: dignity. The homeless man's lips trembled, and for the first time in a long while, he felt the weight of possibility rather than hopelessness. Passers-by continued to watch, some unable to hide their admiration, others whispering questions and exclamations among themselves. They had witnessed celebrities before, they had seen acts of generosity occasionally, but rarely had anyone experienced such a quiet, powerful, and personal act of compassion unfold in the middle of a busy city street. Cameras clicked, phones recorded, and even those not recording paused, sensing the gravity of the moment. The man's hands shook as he reached toward Steven, unsure if he was allowed to accept. The wallet, the gift, the gesture, all of it seemed almost too much. He looked at Steven, searching for permission, reassurance, or perhaps a hint that this was real and not a cruel trick. But Steven simply maintained his calm, patient gaze, nodding ever so slightly as if to say, "Yes, you deserve this. Take it, and carry yourself forward." Tears welled up in the man's eyes. They were not tears of sadness but of relief, gratitude, and awe. A lump formed in his throat, his voice caught in his chest, and he swallowed hard, struggling to find words. Around them, the street seemed quieter, as if the city itself was holding its breath. People who had walked past without notice earlier now stopped, watching, reflecting on what had just occurred. In that brief, suspended moment, the lesson was clear: kindness is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet, subtle, and yet infinitely more powerful. It is not measured in the amount given but in the respect, dignity, and awareness with which it is offered. And in this instance, Steven Seagal had shown that even a single moment, a single gesture, can transform a life. The homeless man finally managed a shaky nod. His voice was barely audible, but it carried immense gratitude. Thank you, sir. I don't know what to say." Steven smiled once more and straightened, the calm authority returning as he prepared to leave. The street, which had been bustling with indifference moments ago, now carried an unspoken reverence. People whispered, reflected, and for some, even reconsidered how they treated those they normally ignored. The encounter was over, But its impact lingered, a silent reminder that true kindness is measured in moments, not money, and that the smallest gestures, offered with patience and dignity, can leave an imprint far larger than anyone could expect. The moment that had held the street in suspense stretched longer than anyone could have expected. Steven Seagal reached into his pocket slowly, deliberately, and pulled out more than just a coin or a small bill. In his hand was a full wallet, carefully packed with cash, gift cards, and other essentials, enough to give the man not just temporary relief, but a real chance to begin again. The homeless man's eyes widened as the wallet was placed gently into his trembling hands. For a heartbeat, he could not speak. His lips parted, his chest rose and fell with rapid, shallow breaths, and a tear escaped from the corner of his eye. He had never imagined receiving anything so thoughtful, so empowering. Not one passerby had given him anything like this, not even a kind word, let alone a gift that could truly change his life. People around them instinctively pulled out their phones. Some started recording, their whispers rising above the normal city noise. "Did you see that?" one said. "I can't believe he just did that," murmured another. There was a murmur of disbelief and awe, as strangers who had once ignored the man now watched in stunned silence. The energy of the street shifted. The hurried pace slowed. People stopped to witness an act that felt extraordinary, not because of celebrity, but because of the humanity behind it. Steven Seagal looked at the man with a calm, steady gaze, crouching slightly to meet his eyes once more. His voice, quiet but commanding, carried weight. "Use this wisely. You deserve a fresh start." The homeless man's hands shook violently as he clutched the wallet to his chest. He could barely form the words. I don't know how to, thank you," he stammered, tears streaming freely now. The emotions he had carried for weeks, months, maybe even years, poured out in a mix of disbelief, gratitude, and a fragile hope. Steven's expression remained serene. He did not lecture, he did not scold. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic speech. He simply nodded, a subtle acknowledgement that the man had the power to take this gift and change his own life. The authority in Steven's presence was quiet, unshakable, and more powerful than any words. Around them, the onlookers were stunned into reflection. A woman recorded the moment on her phone and whispered to the person next to her, "That's not just generosity, that's respect." Another passerby shook his head, muttering, "I've seen millionaires throw money before, but I've never seen anyone give like that." The homeless man finally looked up, his eyes meeting Steven's. The words he had struggled to find earlier now came slowly, haltingly. I promise. I'll make this count." His voice cracked with emotion, but there was determination too. For the first time in a long while, he felt a spark of agency, a sense that he could make choices that mattered. Steven nodded once, a slight smile crossing his lips. He straightened, ready to continue his walk through the city streets, blending back into the everyday flow as quietly as he had appeared. Yet the impact of the moment lingered, heavier and more powerful than any noise the city could make. Comment below, how would you react if a stranger gave you a second chance today? Would you accept it? Would you pay it forward? The crowd slowly dispersed, many still whispering, replaying the scene in their minds. Some stared after Steven, unable to comprehend how quietly powerful an act of genuine kindness could be. Others approached the man cautiously, offering small words of encouragement, smiles, or assistance. The street that had been indifferent moments ago now felt alive with possibility, hope, and renewed awareness. And for the man holding the wallet, reality began to shift. The weight of survival that had pressed him down for so long seemed lighter now, replaced by the fragile yet undeniable belief that life could be different, that opportunities could appear when least expected, and that even in a harsh city, true kindness still existed. In that sunlit moment, Steven Seagal left more than money behind. He left a lesson. A reminder that compassion, respect, and humility are far more powerful than any currency, and that even the smallest act, when done with genuine intent, can create ripples strong enough to change a life forever. The homeless man clutched the wallet tightly to his chest, feeling its weight not only in his hands but in his chest, as if the gift carried with it the possibility of a new life. Tears streamed freely down his cheeks, catching the sunlight and sparkling for all who happened to glance his way. His lips quivered, and he struggled to form words, but finally managed to whisper, thank you so much. I don't know how to repay you." Steven Seagal simply nodded, his calm, composed demeanor unchanged. There was no need for words, no requirement for gratitude to be verbalized. The act itself spoke louder than anything else could. Without a word, he began walking again, blending seamlessly into the crowd. His steps were measured, deliberate, and completely unhurried. He did not look back, yet the impression he left behind was indelible. People around whispered to each other, their voices hushed with a mix of awe and disbelief. "Did you see that?" one passerby asked. "He gave him an entire wallet, and walked away like it was nothing," said another. Phones continued to record, but the recordings captured only a fraction of the impact. The energy in the street had shifted. Where moments ago there had been indifference, now there was reflection. Strangers glanced at each other, some shaking their heads slowly, as if reconsidering their own actions toward those less fortunate. The homeless man remained standing, a mixture of shock and gratitude holding him in place. He slowly opened the wallet and peeked inside. There were enough bills to last him weeks, gift cards for meals, and other small essentials that could help him regain some stability. It wasn't just money, it was a hand up, a tangible sign that someone saw him, acknowledged his humanity, and believed he deserved more than the daily grind of survival on the streets. As the minutes passed, the man's chest rose and fell with steadier breaths. For the first time in a long while, he felt more than just relief, he felt hope. The lesson embedded in that small act of generosity began to sink in. Respect and humility are not reserved for those who have status, wealth, or power. True respect is extended even when no one expects it, and true humility allows a person to give without seeking recognition. The passers-by, too, seemed affected in subtle ways. Some approached the man, offering words of encouragement, a few coins, or just a smile. Others walked on, but their expressions carried a quiet reflection, a reconsideration of how they might treat people in need in the future. Steven Seagal's quiet act had created ripples, small but significant, that extended beyond the immediate moment. The man looked down at the wallet again, then at the crowd, and finally up the street, hoping to catch a glimpse of Steven one last time. But he was gone, already blending into the rhythm of the city, as though he had never been there at all. And yet, his presence lingered, in the man's gratitude, in the whispers of the crowd, and in the invisible lesson that now hung in the air like sunlight. The man slowly straightened, a new-found determination settling in his posture. He felt empowered to make choices, to take responsibility for this unexpected second chance. The gift was not just material, it was a signal that life could be different, that opportunities could appear where once there had been only struggle, and that the kindness of strangers could transform more than a single moment, it could transform a life. In that busy, sunlit street, a silent lesson had been delivered. Humility and respect are powerful. They travel quietly, unnoticed by many, yet they leave a mark that lingers far longer than a single gesture. Generosity offered without expectation, dignity granted without question, and patience extended without judgment. These are the acts that define true character. As the city returned to its usual rhythm, the man walked forward, the wallet in his hand and hope in his heart. The encounter with Steven Seagal had ended, yet its impact would resonate for far longer than the morning sun that shone down on them both. The city streets slowly returned to their usual rhythm. Cars honked, pedestrians hurried to work, street vendors called out their prices, and sunlight glimmered off the windows of tall buildings. But amid this ordinary bustle, something extraordinary had taken place, a quiet, powerful act of kindness that rippled far beyond the immediate moment. It was a reminder that in a world obsessed with wealth, status, and speed, small gestures of humanity carry a weight no money can measure. Kindness, as the morning had shown, is not defined by coins or bills. It is measured by awareness, the ability to see someone else's struggle, even when the world is rushing past. It is measured by the willingness to step outside your own life and offer help, even when it may seem inconvenient or unnoticed. Steven Seagal had done just that. He didn't lecture the man, he didn't demand recognition, and he didn't make a scene. He simply acknowledged the man's existence, saw his need, and acted. True strength is not in what you possess or the power you hold. It is in lifting others without expecting anything back. It is in offering compassion silently, letting the impact of your actions speak louder than words. The homeless man on the street had asked for just $1, and what he received went far beyond money. He received dignity, a chance, and a lesson in the depth of human generosity. He walked away not just with a wallet, but with a renewed sense of self-worth, a belief that life could be different, and the knowledge that there are people willing to care when no one else seems to notice. The street, once indifferent, had become a witness to humility and respect. Passers-by recorded the moment, whispered among themselves, and carried the story forward in their minds. A simple act had inspired reflection, a reminder that even in a city of millions, individual actions matter. They can lift spirits, challenge assumptions, and spark change, no matter how small or quiet the gesture may seem. And the lesson extends beyond the people on that street. It is a reminder to all of us. When we see someone in need, our reaction matters. When we have the power to help, even in a tiny way, our choice defines who we are. The courage to act with compassion, the humility to treat others with respect, and the wisdom to recognize value in every human being. These are qualities that leave a legacy far greater than wealth or fame ever could. Steven Seagal's quiet departure, blending into the crowd, symbolized something profound. He did not need applause or acknowledgement. His presence and his actions were enough to change a life and inspire countless others. That is the essence of true kindness. It does not demand notice. It does not boast or advertise. It simply exists, and those who experience it carry it forward. So now, as you reflect on this story, consider your own life. Think about the opportunities you have to lift someone else, to offer help, or to acknowledge a struggle that might otherwise go unseen. Every small act matters. Every moment of awareness can ripple outward, touching lives in ways you may never fully see. Generosity, patience, and respect are not bound by money. They are bound by heart. Engagement line: type kindness in the comments if you believe small acts can change lives. And tell me where you are watching from. Every kind heart matters, and every story of compassion is worth celebrating. Remember, life is not about the wealth we accumulate or the power we hold. It is about the moments we choose to be human, the times we extend ourselves for someone else, and the quiet ways we leave the world a little better than we found it. The homeless man walked away that morning with more than a wallet. He walked away with hope. And the world, just for a moment, seemed a little brighter. This story is a reminder that your smallest act of kindness, your quiet gesture of respect, or your moment of awareness can change someone's life forever. True power is silent. True strength is compassionate. True impact is measured not by what you take, but by what you give.